Alright, so moving on to basic selections. So we went over using the black arrow tool to select entire objects, and then also the white arrow tool to select individual points and segments. But let's kind of go over a few other things involving selections um, for our objects. So let's go over a couple other ways that we can select different objects. So the first thing, the first tool I'd like to go over is the lasso tool. So right now, when I need to select a series of shapes, I might have to go through and hold down on the shift key while selecting in order to select multiple shapes. Or I can also drag a marquee box over the selected shapes that I want. But sometimes I need a more free-form way of selecting a series of shapes. So in that case, I'm going to use the lasso tool. Okay, it's located right over here in the tool panel. I can also hit the Q key from the lasso tool. Let's say I need to select a series of shapes that runs along an arc this way. It's kind of hard to select those using the marquee. I could use the shift select, but in this case I'm going to use my lasso. So I'm clicking and holding down, and you can see I'm drawing kind of a free-form line, and this line is eventually going to encapsulate all the objects that I want to select. I got to be careful to make sure that the line goes all the way around the objects, otherwise I'm going to start selecting individual points and segments. So when I'm done completing that free-form line, I'll release, and you can see it has selected all of those objects that it encapsulated. I'll hit the V key to switch back to my black arrow, and now there's a bounding box for all those shapes. I could move those. I'll go ahead and hit Command Z to put those back into place. Also with the lasso tool, I can come in here, so I'll hit the Q key to get back to my lasso. Maybe I just need to select 3 individual points on this object, so I can go ahead and click and make a freeform shape around the points of this square. And then if I hit the A key for the direct selection tool, now I can just select those points and I can start modifying this shape. And we'll go over a little bit more with using the white arrow tool. I'll hit Command Z. Okay, so the next selection tool we can go over is the magic wand tool. So it's located right next to the lasso tool. So I'll go ahead and click on that. You can also hit your Y key to access that. And basically this selection tool is going to select all the objects with a similar appearance. So appearance meaning the fill color, the stroke weight, or the stroke color, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and use my magic wand tool, and I'll go ahead and I'll select this shape right here, this circle with the stroke. If I click on that, you can see it's selecting all the same shapes with that stroke. So in this case, it's a red stroke, and so I'm selecting similar objects with similar appearances. I can actually double click on the magic wand tool to access more options, and I can say, for instance, that I want the selection to include everything with the same stroke weight, and the tolerance is how much of a difference in stroke weight do you want. I'll bring this down. I want it really low to 2, and then I'll go ahead and close that box. I'll hit the Command key and click, and this time I'll select the black stroke with the red fill circle, and you can see it only selects other shapes with a similar stroke weight and a similar stroke color. The other way I can select things is using the select menu. So right up here. So this involves using select and same. So let's say I want to select all of these pink colored circles. I can select this first one, come up to the select menu. I want to select same, and in this case I want to select the same fill color. And you can see I have now selected all of those pink circles. Okay, I can do the same thing with these orange squares. So I'll say select same, and in this case fill color. It's going to select all those shapes with the same fill color. Okay, I can do the same thing with the stroke. Select same, and let's do just stroke color. Even though these are different weight, It's still selecting the same stroke color. And so that's kind of a general overview of making selections here in Illustrator. I'm going to go ahead and move down and just play around with using this white arrow a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and hit the A key. And now that I have my white arrow tool, I'm going to go ahead and hover over this corner of the square and click once. And if you notice, it's a little hard to see, but when I clicked on that anchor point, it filled in the anchor point, meaning it's activated. But these other ones have a white or hollow fill to it, so those are not activated. So that's how you can tell which ones are activated and which ones are not. So if I click and drag now, I can move this point around to reshape it. I'll hit Command Z a couple times to go back to the original state. This time I'll click one anchor point and then hold down on the Shift key, and then I'll click this other one over here. So now I have both of those points activated or selected, and now as I click and drag, it's moving those points together. So we'll go over this a little bit more in the future exercises. But just know that there's all kinds of things you can do as far as selecting and modifying using the white arrow. So we know that we can move points, and if we hold down on the Shift key while moving points, they will move in right angles or symmetrically. We can also move entire segments. So a segment is the path connecting two points. If I select this segment right here and then click and drag, you can see that we can start to modify the individual segments. I'll do the same thing right over here. I'll select this segment and then I'll click and drag. Even on something like circles, you actually have different segments. So you have one point here and one point here, and in between that you have this segment. So if I click here and start to drag, now you can see I'm modifying this segment. This segment happens to have control handles associated with it. Now to modify those control handles, I need to use my white arrow tool. I could come in here and I could start to move these control handles around and start creating different shapes with that. I'll do the same thing with this one here. I'll kind of move these control handles and hold down on the Shift key and just start experimenting with what these control handles do and how they modify our path. Changed a circle into what almost looks like a guitar body. Okay, finally I can come in here and I could delete segments and paths. So if I click on this point and I hit the delete key, it completely takes away that point. Now when I do that, just know that I'm starting to create open paths when I do that. I'll go ahead and select this segment. I'll do a marquee selection of this segment, and then I'll hit the delete key. And now you can see point by point and segment by segment, we can kind of start to modify these individual shapes. Go ahead and do that for this one. I'll zoom out